Alright, today I was going to try and take the stump jumper blade carrier assembly off and see if I can't straighten it. But when I got underneath here, what I noticed that I didn't notice before is there's a lot of welding on this. You can see a big bead on the inside there, and I can see another big bead right there. So it looks like this recently had some work done to it. I know that the guy that I bought it from, that he did weld, he had some equipment, so it looks like he did some repair work on this. But that also makes me wonder whether or not the carrier isn't bent, and if it's just the stump jumper itself. In other words, instead of that really thick piece of steel that goes, that's behind here, that actually is what supports the blades, maybe it's just this thinner steel stump jumper part right here that's bent. So I did verify that just now, actually. Now what I did was I got a magnetic level and was able to stick it on there, and actually I can't get it to stick on there now, but I did a second ago. Anyways, what I did was I stuck it on there, and then I measured the distance from the bottom of the deck down to the level, and it was 2 3/4 inches. And then I spun it all the way around to the other side, and I did the same thing, and I had the same measurement. So what that tells me is that this bottom edge here of the blade carrier, where the holes are that the blade bolts go through, they are both the same distance above the deck. So that tells me that the blades are going to be at the same height when this is spinning, even though it looked like this side might have been pushed up. But then I also noticed that if I take the level here and I use it as a reference mark and kind of just have it point right at a spot right on the pan there, that it actually it widens out, and then it closes right up right about there, and then it starts to open back up on the other side. So the point where it seems like it's closest is right there. That's actually not right in line with the bolt hole like I originally thought. In other words, if this blade carrier bar that goes right across here right now, it's going like that way, if that was bent up like that, this should be where it should be closed up the most, not back here. So what that tells me is that what I'm dealing with is the pan struck something and just got bent up on this one spot, and it's just the pan itself. And I don't think it's really worth the aggravation that it's going to be for me to take this whole carrier off, considering I don't know when the last time that bolt was taken off. Today I'm taking off this front flat piece of metal stock that was bolted on the front here as a makeshift, some sort of a guard. I don't think this was factory original. This looks like something maybe somebody put together. I don't quite know what this material is. It's kind of like almost like the consistency of old car floor mats, and you can see most of it's gone, long since shredded away. So I got all the bolts out with breaker bar and socket except for one. The nut's so badly rusted I can't grab onto it, so I'm gonna try it with vice grips, and if that doesn't work, I'll grind off the head. And once I get this off, I'm going to mount a piece of angle iron on here and make a makeshift chain guard. While I'm working up here in the front, I'm going to take off this bad pin. I bought a new pin assembly from Tractor Supply, so I'm going to see if I can't get this one off. Well, that's a bummer. This is really worn out. Almost looks like there's some kind of washer, remnants of some kind of washer still in there. It's all squashed. And then same thing with the back side. So problem is, when I put the new pin in, this kind of collar is sitting down in there, and it's going to be kind of crooked, tilted up a little bit. That's going to take away about 1/4 inch of, well, at least 1/4 inch of lift in the front on this side. which this pin on this side's actually already bent up a little bit, so that's not helping the situation either. So I'm not so thrilled with that. So I'm going to see if I can't, since I got all this extra thread on here and all this extra room, I'm wondering if I can rig up some kind of spacers, like some large washers, to go in there. See what I can come up with. Alright, my neighbor, the machinist, is going to make up some kind of a bushing for me to go in here. And hopefully that'll straighten out that problem over there. And then what I'm going to do while he's working on that is continue working on my guard. I just temporarily clamped this in place to give you an idea of what my basic theory is going to be here on how this is going to work. I'm going to drill holes and bolt this into place where this guard used to be, or this piece of strap metal was. And then I'm going to drill a series of holes along this and hang pieces of chain off of this, and that's going to be my chain guard. Okay, I drilled one hole. I marked where that first hole was going to go by eye, drilled a hole and inserted a bolt, and then down the line I made marks on the top, lining up with each bolt hole, the center of each bolt hole. And then I transferred those marks using a combination square to the tops. So now I can finish drilling my other holes. I'm drilling these by drilling a pilot hole first, and then enlarging the hole, or counter boring. Then the other thing I did was I changed my design. Thought originally when I clamped this on here, I clamped it on like this, and then I thought about it and realized that my leading edge that was going to be hitting any larger brush and saplings that I want to push over is going to be basically hitting this, and this is not as thick as I would want it to be if I'm going to be using this as the taking that brunt of force. So basically what I'm doing is I'm flipping this over end for end, and I'm going to mount this on like this, so this edge will be up higher. What that's going to do is that's still going to make contact first, but it's only going to have to push the brush forward a little bit before this bottom edge of this much heavier steel is able to actually start really doing the job of pushing it over. So I think that's going to be beneficial. Hopefully this will be able to hold up to the abuse that way. Well, it's getting pretty dark now. Put the floodlights on in the backyard, but they're not doing much good. So I'm going to have to end up quitting. I did end up taking a sledge and banging this back in. I don't know if you recall, it's kind of hard to see in the dark here, but this was actually flared out, and I banged that back in. I just temporarily put this skirt back in place to see how that was tightening up, and that looks good. So I'm going to want to try and flatten out this skirt some, because big problem with this skirt is up at this end here, it's twisted in. So that's this bottom edge right here. So I'm going to try and pound on that, see if I can't straighten it out. Came up with another idea to try and flatten this out. I'm going to use my 20-ton shop press and see whether or not I can't rig up a way to flatten that in the press. Okay, this is going to be my first attempt. I'm going to try and just take this big curve out of the end here. I'm going to move this back a little bit. Well, it takes a lot of finagling and repositioning. Started out by putting pinpoint pressure with just the actual shaft of the press on some of the really high spots, and then now I put the plates in here and I'm walking it along and pressing and straightening the whole thing out, and it's working pretty well. Well, I finally made a decision on what I was going to do with this tail wheel assembly and what I was going to order. I decided to order the old style caster assembly is what they call it, part number BH215. It's a Tisco part. It's an aftermarket wheel, but it's the old style, so it had the hub like this one had, which used to have tapered rolling bearings, one on each side, and seals and everything, and a 1-inch shaft. It's about $100, And I opted not to buy the complete new assembly with the new fork part here. I decided I'm going to reuse this one. So first thing I'm going to do to reuse this one is I'm going to straighten this because that's bent. So my neighbor had this really short bottle jack that just fits in there. So what I'll do now is I'll use that to bend this out. Alright, that looks pretty good. Check it up at the top here where it's not bent out. The inside is 5 5/8 inches. And now down here at the bottom it's 5 5/8. So now that's all straightened out. There's two other issues with this. The top of the post here, this is supposed to be a 1.5 inch diameter pin. The top is pretty worn, about 15 thousandths off. That's a big part of why it's so sloppy in the when you put it in the A-frame. And talked to my neighbor about advice on how to handle that, how hard it would be to change this pin out, and his advice was to just use some shim stock and shim this up. And I think that that's good advice, rather than getting into the whole horrible predicament of trying to change this pin out because of the way it's welded in there. And it actually looks like it was already re-welded once before. So until it cracks and snaps again, I'm not going to bother addressing that issue. And then the last issue I need to take care of is these enlarged holes, which I'm going to wait until I get the new 1-inch axle bolt in with the wheel and see how bad they actually are. And if I have to, then I'll have him weld them up a little bit. This one actually doesn't look as bad, I don't think, as this one here. This one here is really got a really elongated area, so I'll probably just have him weld this up. So for now, until I get the wheel in, I'm done with that. Now over here, he took care of this other issue for me. I don't know if you recall, but I had this apart. Got this big worn out concave area here, and the problem is that when the pin goes in there, it actually sits in like that, and that makes the pin really crooked. So what I did was I grind this smooth, and he fabricated some real heavy spacers, basically like big giant washers out of some stock that he had. And now I'm going to put that all together. And he made two, one for each side, because the back side also had an area that was a little dug out. Alright, that's all tightened up and good. So that takes care of that. This one's a little bent. It's actually a little bent back, so I'm going to leave that one alone because it's still good and tight. Now that it's daylight, you can see where I was able to use the sledge. Back on my maul I used as a sledge, and I was able to bend this back in. This was kind of bent out like that too far. So now I can slip that skirt behind there that I straightened out. You can see the skirt's a lot straighter. I could bolt that on, except for right now my wood blocking's in the way, so I'm going to have to wait until I get the tractor hooked up and lifted up. And I don't want to do that until I finish my chain guard project here. Also, I'm going to probably leave this skirt off while I'm putting the blades back on, just in case I need to see underneath there better. Alright, so I temporarily bolted up my my angle iron here, and I made a mark where I'm going to cut the angle iron. So now I'm going to remove the angle iron and cut it to length. That's it. Keep going. That's good. Keep going. You having trouble, Mark? Yeah, I'll show you again. That's it, just like that. That's it, it's going. There you go. Keep going. Good job. I just use a metal cutoff blade mounted in a circular saw. I clamp the work down, and actually does a pretty good job cutting. Just gotta have a pretty steady hand.